Think about the last time you bought a new tool. You probably grabbed it off a rack in a big box store or ordered it online. It arrived in a sealed plastic clamshell with a barcode on it. You gave the company your money, they gave you a tool, and the transaction was instantly over. If you didn't know how to use it properly, well, that was your problem. Go watch a video and figure it out. That's the modern standard. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time when the company that sold you a tool also felt responsible for what happened after you bought it. Not in a legal sense, not because of liability, because they actually cared. If you go back to the 1940s, the relationship between the companies who made tools and the people who used them was completely different. Back then, when a company sold you a piece of precision equipment, they didn't just want to make a quick sale and move on to the next guy. And what you're looking at right now is proof of that. This is a 1947 instructional booklet published by Starrett, one of the most respected precision tool manufacturers in American history. On the surface, it looks like a simple educational guide, or just an old catalog meant to sell micrometers and steel rules. But when you read what's inside, when you understand what they were actually doing here, it changes how you think about the relationship between a machinist and the company that equipped them. On the inside cover, the very first thing Starrett tells you is who this book is for. They dedicated this booklet to the young people in vocational schools, to the apprentices on the factory floor, and to the veterans of World War II who were returning home to rebuild their lives in the machine shops of America. Think about what that means. They looked at a young person just entering the trade and said, "We want to be part of your foundation. We want to be there from the beginning." They also gave a specific nod to the seasoned tradespeople who were taking apprentices under their wing. Starrett understood that they were training the next generation of craftsmen and respected them. This booklet was, in part, a gift to those instructors, a resource they could put in the hands of every apprentice that came through their shop. That being said, we can't ignore the fact that this booklet was also without question an advertisement, but a very clever one. Not because they were manipulated, but because they felt supported. That's not a sales tactic, that's a relationship, and there's a difference. And now we enter the vernier tools section of this booklet, and we arrive at what is arguably the most iconic Starrett instrument, the micrometer. Starrett devotes several pages to breaking down the components and teaching the reader exactly how to read it. There's a full sectional diagram of the Starrett micrometer, every component labeled. The frame is the main body. The anvil and the spindle are the two faces that do the measuring. The part you turn is the thimble, and the main scale on the body is the hub. And then they include a step-by-step explanation of the measurement principle, but taking it down so clearly that a first-year vocational school student could follow it. And to do this, they explain the classic dollars and cents method. The part you turn is the thimble, and the main scale on the body is the hub. Every full rotation of the thimble moves the spindle exactly 25 thousandths of an inch. The big numbers that run along the length of the hub are the dollars. So 1 is equal to 100 thousandths, or 0.100. The small lines between these numbers along the hub are the quarters, worth 25 thousandths each. And the numbers on the thimble, those are the pennies. Each one is 1,000th of an inch. That's the kind of care you would expect from an instructor, not an advertisement. But mastering the micrometer and other manual gauges wasn't just about doing the math. It was about developing the feel. Starrett knew that a micrometer measurement could easily be skewed or misread by heavy-handed ignorance. And that's why, in addition to reinforcing this throughout the booklet in the first few pages, Starrett dedicated an entire section to the importance of sight and touch, the two senses a precision machinist depends on. They talk about how a skilled machinist has to develop their sense of feel in order to detect dimensional differences too small for the eye to catch. They describe how holding a contact tool lightly in the fingertips, rather than gripping it tightly, preserves that sensitivity. And they reinforce that sense of touch can be developed over time with practice and patience. And while this may be common knowledge in theory, the nuance of this is old-world knowledge, the kind of thing a master machinist passed down to his apprentice on the shop floor. And Starrett put it in print so that every young man who opened this booklet had access to it, whether they had a mentor or not. But by dedicating pages to the proper grip, the right amount of friction, and the deliberate calculation of the lines, they weren't just educating you. This also served as an insurance policy. And this is a theme that can be seen throughout this booklet. Starrett wasn't just printing these books out of the goodness of their hearts and care for their customers. There was a brilliant, calculated reason behind this level of education. A precision tool is only as accurate as the hands holding it. If a green apprentice grabs a brand new micrometer, cranks down on the thimble like it's a C-clamp, and gets a ruined measurement, who do you think they are going to blame? They're not going to blame their own lack of skill, they're going to blame the tool. Starrett understood that user error was the single greatest threat to their legendary reputation. By teaching the American machinist exactly how to hold, feel, and read these instruments properly, they were protecting their own legacy. They weren't just educating a workforce, they were actively bulletproofing their brand against the dangerous combination of high precision and low experience. And on the topic of not just understanding how to use these tools, but understanding the nuances of it, in the following pages, Starrett shares another one of the most important lessons in the manual, which is the critical importance of specifying the correct tolerances. The most obvious sign of an inexperienced engineer is one who overspecifies tolerances. This booklet makes it very clear that specifying a limit that is tighter than the job actually requires isn't a sign of a better craftsman, it's a sign of a wasteful one. Every extra decimal point of precision adds exponential cost, machine wear, and time. To help you avoid this, Starrett provided detailed tables of standard fits, ranging from loose running fits to heavy force fits. These tables were designed to ensure that parts would actually function together in the real world, without wasting hours of precision labor on a dimension that didn't require it. They wanted to teach you that true mastery is about hitting the correct tolerance, not just the tightest one. Because in a high production shop, over-engineering a tolerance is just as bad as missing it. By following these tables, a machinist could ensure perfect mechanical function without the unnecessary perfection that kills a shop's productivity. But the real genius of this booklet isn't just in the measuring instructions. As we flip towards the end of this booklet, you won't find a desperate sales pitch or an order form. Instead, Starrett packed it with more reference tables, including decimal equivalents, tap drill sizes, and wire gauges. They knew that a working machinist relied on having this information on hand, so they gave you the ultimate cheat sheet. By including these tables, Starrett guaranteed that this little book wouldn't just be read once and thrown in the trash. It was designed to live permanently in the top drawer of your Gerstner chest, or covered in oil right inside the breast pocket of your shop apron. They understood the daily reality of the American shop floor, and they wanted to be the silent partner, helping you get through every single shift. It's hard to look through a book like this and not feel a sense of loss. While Starrett still proudly publishes free literature on how to use their tools, today most of the tool companies out there have been bought up by massive conglomerates who are too busy shaving pennies off manufacturing costs to print educational books for young machinists. But in 1947, companies like Starrett knew that the greatest tool in any shop wasn't made of hardened steel. It was the mind of the craftsman using it. If you still have one of these old Starrett reference books in your shop, hold on to it. It's proof of a time when companies truly cared about their customers. Let me know in the comments about your experience in vocational school or as an apprentice. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more vintage tool history posted every week. And let me know if there's another vintage tool catalog that you would like to see featured next.